But John Robinson had a big game, and honestly, you might as well just had him continue to run it, and maybe they would have had a better shot. But he had 23 carries, 142 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 5 catches for 51 yards. Welcome to Just the Stats, NFL Top 10's for Monday. Wow, what a weekend we had. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and we had some big games. There weren't a lot of games that I watched where you saw some big numbers being put up by quarterbacks or wide receivers, running backs. But as far as importance go, there were some huge games between divisional rivals, also just games that involved the playoff scenarios, big changes. So we'll look at that more carefully probably on Wednesday for sure. Maybe Thursday, but Wednesday or Thursday for sure. But man, we had some big games. And we'll start looking at the Sunday games as well as the game on Friday. And if you want to hear about the games that were on Thursday, you can listen to my podcast that I did on Friday where I covered all 3 Thursday games then, because there were 3 games. So I figured I better get them covered. Now today we'll cover the game on Friday. We'll cover the early Sunday games. And then tomorrow we'll wrap up all the games that there were, including the Monday night game. But like I said, these games are big. So we're going to look at these games. We'll look at this, how the game went basically, as well as anybody who had a top 10 for their team or for the NFL. And I tell you what, the last game, if we can get to it, will be the Rams. And they lost, but Devontae Adams just keeps going with those touchdown catches. So we'll take a look at that. All right. Let's get going here, and we will start with a game on Friday between the Chicago Bears and the Philadelphia Eagles. And I continue to be amazed by the Bears. Frankly, didn't think they'd win this game, and they actually won it rather handily. 24-15, the Bears beat the Eagles in Philadelphia. And if you watched the game, you heard the booing going on quite regularly against the Eagles by their fans. Their offense just is not connecting very well. Starting with the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, 19 for 34 for 230 yards, 2 touchdowns and interceptions. So just over 50%, not too much over 50. Did throw an interception. Saquon Barkley, 13 carries for 56 yards. Actually, it's one of his better running days, but only 13 carries. And why, I don't know. They were losing at halftime 10-3, but then it was 10-9 after the third quarter, and yet Barkley has 13 carries. Hurts had 4 carries for 31 yards, and that's it. 17 carries in this game is all they had. Now, in the passing department, it was A.J. Brown, 10 catches for 132 yards and the 2 touchdowns. He was by far the dominant receiver. Now, Saquon Barkley, who had made it into the top 10 as far as receptions by running backs, had 2 targets but no catches. Just not a good game all the way around. And like I said, Hurts threw for a little over 50%, had an interception, also had a fumble, though. Just didn't do himself any favors in this game. Now, for Chicago, I mean, Caleb Williams was even worse, honestly. 17 completions on 36 attempts, so that's less than 50%. Only 150 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Now, Kyle Mononagay and DeAndre Swift, that's where the game was. Mononagay had 130 yards. Swift had 125. They both had a touchdown. So between them, 255 yards rushing. They ended up with a total with other players of 281 rushing yards. That's where the game was, and that's why Caleb Williams' performance really didn't matter. The Philadelphia defense could not stop the run, and they just ran up and down the field on them. And that just runs the clock as well. So big game by them. Nobody in the passing department had more than 36 yards for the Chicago Bears. So if you had any of their players as receivers, you're not going to be happy. Now, if you had Cole Kmet, he did have 3 catches, 36 yards, and 1 touchdown. So he would have been the only one where you'd have gotten any real fantasy points. Now, Swift had 125 yards rushing and 13 yards receiving. He ended up actually with more yards total than Mononagay. He had 130. What did I say? 38 yards to 130 for Mononagay. So between them, they just dominated Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are now 8-4. Chicago Bears are 9-3. I mean, honestly, who would have thought that after the start that the Eagles and Bills had, where they went undefeated? They were the last teams to be beaten, and now the Eagles have 4 losses. Now, in this game, there were a couple of top 10's. For the Chicago Bears, Cairo Santos, their kicker, had 6 points. He needed 3 to move up the list in the total points scored by a Chicago Bear all time. So Carlos Santos was in 5th. Now he has 632 points with the 6 points he got from Friday. He now has 632. Like I said, he's now in 4th place. He passed Bob Thomas, who played in the late 70s and early 80s. So 632 points for him. That's probably as far as he gets this year because Walter Payton is 3rd, and he's got 750 points. So he won't be seeing him until next year probably. But good game for him. Now, for the Philadelphia Eagles, despite the fact that Devontae Smith, he did go 5 catches for 48 yards. As far as receptions, he only needed 1 reception to move into 10th place all by himself. He was tied with Mike Quick, who played in the 80s. And he ended up with 5 catches, so he now has 368 to move him ahead of Mike Quick. Keith Byers is next with 371. So good game for him as far as that goes, as far as getting into the top 10. And it goes the same with the yards. He also was in 11th place in yards. Only needed 6 yards in this game. And he got them. He got 48, like I mentioned. So with 48 yards, he now has 4,813. He was in 11th. He passed Jeremy Maclin, who played from 2009 to 2014. So he's sole possession of 10th, drops Maclin out of the top 10. Next up is Brent Seelick, the player they had from 2007 to 2017, who has almost 5,000 yards. So it's probably going to, especially when you're averaging 48, 50 yards a game, it's going to take a few games for him to catch Brent Selleck. But Brent Selleck's in 9th, so that's next up for Devontae Smith. All right, let's move on to our next game, which was the San Francisco 49ers versus the Cleveland Browns. This was in Cleveland. San Francisco pretty much handled the game. Cleveland Browns don't have much of an offense, and no matter how good your defense is, you just can't be on the field all the time with your defense. San Francisco 49ers win this game 26-8. I mean, Cleveland had 1 touchdown, 2-point conversion, and that was it. That was in the second quarter. That's the only time they scored. And the rest of the time, San Francisco just moved up and down the field slowly but steadily and racked up, not a lot of yards, actually, only 252 yards, but that was good enough to beat the Browns. The Browns had 253 yards total. So this wasn't, like I said, there was a lot of games like this where the stats weren't outstanding in the game. Now for Cleveland, Shadir Sanders, 16 completions on 25 attempts for 149 yards and 1 touchdown. That's not terrible. Um, I'm surprised that's all he had. You would have thought there would even be more. Quinshon Judkins had one of his better games recently. A lot of carries, 23 carries for 91 yards. No touchdowns, though. And I'm a little curious, to the fact that Cleveland being behind this game, though at halftime it was 10-8, and even after the third quarter it was still reasonably close, 17-8. But they needed to be throwing the ball a little bit more, and they just couldn't get it done. Though they did have 2 fumbles. That really hurt. Slowed them down for sure. But those are the 2 players for Cleveland that we're looking at. Now let's look at Myles Garrett. Another sack, another 2 tackles for loss. Guy's been incredible. He's moving into territory of all-time sacks in a season. We'll look at that in a couple of days probably. Now for San Francisco, Brock Purdy, just another average game, 16 completions on 29 attempts for 168 yards and a touchdown. Now, no interceptions this game. Last week, he threw 3 interceptions, which they still won the game, but it really hindered them. Christian McCaffrey running against that Cleveland defense. He tried 20 carries, but only 53 yards. He did have a touchdown, though. 20 carries, 53 yards. That's not even 2.5 yards a carry, or a little over 2.5 yards a carry. That's it. But that you knew that was going to be the game against Cleveland. They're just so good all-around defense that it's hard to expect much more out of them. Now, George Kittle had a decent game, 4 catches, 67 yards on 5 targets. Jawan Jennings, 4 catches, 39 yards, but he did have a touchdown. Those are your top 2 players there. All right, now for numbers. In this game, despite the fact that Purdy only had 16 completions, he did have 1 touchdown. That's what he needed, was 1 touchdown. And with that 1 touchdown, he now passes Colin Kaepernick. They were tied for 9th place with 72 touchdown passes. He now passes him. He has 73, so he's in 9th place all by himself. Next up for him is Alex Smith, who was the quarterback from 2005 to 2012. He had 81 touchdown passes. He might catch him, maybe not. He's going to have to do better than 1 a game to do it. So we'll see what happens by the end of the year. But right now, 73 puts him in 9th place as far as most passing touchdowns by a San Francisco 49er. Now, McCaffrey, despite the fact that he did not have that great of a game either, he did have that touchdown. And that touchdown moves him out of a tie with Frankie Albert, who played from 1946 to 1952. They both had 27 rushing touchdowns for the 49ers. With 1 more, Christian McCaffrey now is in 8th place by himself with 28 rushing touchdowns for the San Francisco 49ers. Next up for McCaffrey is Hugh McElhenny, who played from 1952 to 1960. He's got 35. This team here, every player, Christian McCaffrey's moving up among players who played in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Frank Gore is in 2nd with 64 rushing touchdowns. He played from 2005 to 2014. He's the newest player on this list for the 49ers. So they don't have anybody in recent history who's racked up enough touchdowns to be on this list, except for Frank Gore, and he finished his career with the 49ers 11 years ago. So McCaffrey's, he'll catch some of these people. He's only got 28, but, I don't know how much longer he's got in his career. I don't see him catching Joe Perry, who has 68. Joe Perry played from 1948 to 1963, another top player who played quite a long time ago. His record's been good for now 62 years, and it's going to be good for a lot longer than that. But good for McCaffrey, is now in 8th place. All right, let's move on to our next game, which is the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans. This was a big game for the Jaguars, who had come off a victory last week in a tight game with Arizona, and have a big, huge divisional rival game next week with the Colts. And so, but they handled Tennessee easily. Tennessee just couldn't do anything. They scored a field goal first drive of the game, and that's the last they ever sniffed of the end zone. Ended up Jaguars winning the game 25-3. That was it. Now, like I said, this was a big game for the Jaguars. They're 8-4. They are technically in first place now in their division over the Colts. They're both 8-4, but because of conference wins and so forth, the Jaguars are in first place. But it really doesn't matter because they play next week, and that will make a big difference. And we'll see who's in first place, not only by tiebreakers, but by just record itself. Fortunately for the Tennessee Titans, they are now 1-11, so they are just looking at first pick in the draft. Now for Tennessee, Cam Ward, 24 for 38, 141 yards. He threw the ball 38 times, had 24 completions, which is a decent percentage, but only 141 yards. That's terrible. They just couldn't really ever get anything consistent. Now, Tony Pollard started off the game running fairly well, 10 carries, 60 yards, but as they kept falling farther and farther behind, they gave up the running game in an effort to try to get back in the game, and it just didn't work at all. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, 16 for 30, 16 completions on 27 attempts for 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. More importantly, 0 interceptions. 3 interceptions last week. That was horrible. But 2 touchdown passes, 16 for 27 is a decent percentage-wise. But the 229 yards on only 16 completions is good. Big, as far as receiving goes, was Jacoby Myers. 6 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown, and one of those was 50 yards. So there was a few passes. Brent Strange caught a touchdown pass. It was 21 yards. Parker Washington only had 1 catch, but it was 26 yards. Now, he went out of the game, something with his hip, and hopefully it's nothing serious. But Jacoby Myers has really been a good influence on this team, and what a good pickup he was. Now, as far as rushing goes, Travis Etienne had made it into the top 10. As far as rushing goes, he'll probably fall out because he had 12 carries, only 28 yards in this game. Only 27 rushing attempts in the game. And the second half was just kind of a game of Tennessee knew they were going to try to run it, and Jaguars had no interest in really showing too much or doing too much. They were just trying to run the clock because the game, it was easily apparent that Tennessee had no fight in them, and they didn't. So it was kind of just not much of a second half, except just to watch the clock run out. So nobody really rushed much in this game. Deshaun Tootin had 8 carries, 17 yards, but he did have a touchdown. Now, looking at the defense, it was a good game again for Josh Hines-Allen. 3 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. He's finally starting to show a little more for all that money they paid him, and good for him. Now, as far as stats go, only 1, and again, this is total points, but Cam Little just needed 1 point to move into a tie with Keenan McCardell for 10th place. He came into the game with 189 points. He got 5. He now has 194, so he knocks Keenan McCardell out of 10th place. Cam Little is now in 10th all-time in total points for the Jacksonville Jaguars with 194 points. Next up for him is Mercedes Lewis, who has 200, so he could easily catch him next week. Next up is the Houston Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. Another huge game, and thanks to the Houston Texans winning this game and the Jaguars winning, they are now into first place. But the Texans definitely needed the game as they're trying to play catch up. And with their win 20-16 over the Indianapolis Colts, the Texans moved to 7-5. The Colts are now 8-4. And like I said, the Colts and the Jaguars play next week. One of them's going to lose. And if Houston wins, that means Houston would then be tied with either the Colts or the Jaguars. And considering where the Houston Texans were, they've made it quite an impressive turnaround of their team. Got Stroud back on the field last week, and so they're a force to be reckoned with. But, so are the Jaguars. And if you watch some of the pregame things, and if you watch any of that kind of stuff or listen to it, there's all the talk about who's going to win this division, whether it's going to be the Colts or the Texans. No mention of the Jaguars, who are actually in first place now. The Jaguars still have to prove that they're the team to beat in this division, and they will do that next week if they can beat the Colts. Now, in this game for the Indianapolis Colts, Daniel Jones, 14 for 27, 201 yards and 2 touchdowns. So just over 50% passing, but over 200 yards. Jonathan Taylor had a good game, and we're talking about against the Houston Texans too. 21 carries for 85 yards. No touchdowns, though. As far as receivers go, Alec Pierce was the main guy here. 4 catches for 78 yards. Like I said, there was only 14 completions in this game. Jonathan Taylor, as far as all around, he had another 36 yards receiving. So he ended up with, 121 yards of total offense. Good game for him because he had a rough game before. For the Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud, first game back, 22 for 35 for 276 yards. So pretty good game there. Did have 1 interception, though, and no touchdown passes. Now, Woody Marks had an okay game, 19 carries for 64 yards, so a little over 3 yards a carry. Nick Chubb did have the touchdown run, as did Nico Collins on a end run where he ran it around for 7 yards in for a touchdown. So though he didn't get 1 receiving, he did get a touchdown rushing. And he led the team in receiving as well, 5 catches, 98 yards. So it's good to see him back if you're a Houston fan, and Stroud connecting those 2 players. So for Nico Collins, he did have 105 total yards and 1 touchdown. Jaden Higgins came in second with 5 catches as well on 65 yards. Now, Nico Collins is 5 catches, but he had 10 targets, so he's definitely the guy they were targeting, as well as Dalton Schultz, who had 7 catches. So he had the most catches, but only 55 yards. So good game for them and the Houston Texans. Now, in this game, Stroud, like I said, he had a decent game, but he did have an interception. And that interception moved him into a tie for 5th place all-time in Houston Texans history for quarterback interceptions. Now he's tied with Sage Rosenfels with 23 interceptions that he's thrown. Interestingly enough, Davis Mills, his backup, has 25 interceptions, so he's 4th. So that's the next up for C.J. Stroud to catch is Davis Mills. Not that he wants to, but that's where he stands at this point in time. All right, next game up. Not much to say here. This is the Saints and the Dolphins. And Dolphins, they're trying to hang in there. They have a slim chance to make the playoff. They win again in a very tough game, 21-17 over the Saints. The Saints had a chance to win this game, but Olave dropped a pass in the end zone, I believe it was, and would have, which could have definitely given them a shot to win the game. Now, in this game, again, this is a game where they have to rely on their running game, and that's Devon Achane. 22 carries, 134 yards, and 1 touchdown. He just has been very impressive. Now, he had been good as far as receiving as well, but no catches, only 1 target. But Tua Tagovailoa only threw 12 had only 12 completions in this game on 23 attempts, so just over a 50% with one interception, only 157 yards. So really not a good game at all for Tua. So that running game producing was very important for them. And it was primarily Devon. I mean, they had a total of 32 rushing attempts for 164 yards, with Devon having 134 of those yards. Now, Darren Waller came back. He'd been injured. He came back, had 2 catches for 47 yards, which was the most yards of any player for the Miami Dolphins. Now, for the Saints, they just don't have anybody on offense. I mean, Tyler Schaff, 26 completions on 38 attempts, which is really a very good percentage-wise, 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he was intercepted once, sacked 4 times. Now, in the passing game, it was Devon Vele, 8 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown. Not somebody you expect to see. Chris Olave, like I said, had a drop. He was targeted 7 times, 4 catches, 47 yards. He did have a touchdown, though. Now, Juwan Johnson, the tight end, had the most targets, 9, but he only had 5 catches for 39 yards on those 9 targets. Not only did Schaff have an interception, he also had a fumble, which really hurt them. They came back in the end. I mean, Miami was winning this game 16-0 at halftime. And New Orleans came back and tried to make a game of it, and they did make a game of it, but just not enough to actually catch Miami. So Miami now is 5-7, while the New Orleans Saints are 2-10. Now in this game, Devon Achane needed 25 yards to move into 10th place all time for the Miami Dolphins as far as rushing yards. Well, he got 134, which was not only good enough to pass 10th spot, he also passed the 9th place player, which is Mark Higgs, and he also passed Delvin Williams. So Delvin Williams will drop out of the top 10. Mark Higgs is now 10th, and Devon Achane is now 9th all-time in rushing yards with 2,741 yards for the Miami Dolphins. Now, next up for him is Lamar Miller, who played from 2012 to 2015. He's got 2,930. So he needs less than 200 yards, but probably be a couple of games before he catches Lamar Miller for 8th place. That was about it for that game. And same for the next game as far as there's no stats in the next game to talk about. But it was the Atlanta Falcons and the New York Jets. Man, the Atlanta Falcons needed this game. They needed to win because they did have a chance to stay in the competition, but they lost. They're now 4-8. A game they shouldn't have lost. A really interesting game there. But the Jets win this game 27-24. Jets are now 3-9. The Falcons are 4-8. Now, Kirk Cousins, which is primarily the reason, didn't have a bad game. 21 completions on 33 attempts for 234 yards, 1 touchdown. Now, Bijan Robinson had a big game, and honestly, you might as well just had him continue to run it, and maybe they would have had a better shot. But he had 23 carries, 142 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 5 catches for 51 yards, so he had 193 yards of offense in this game. Another big game for him. He's looked so impressive so far this season. I mean, he was their second leading receiver behind Kyle Pitts, who had a good game with 7 catches and 82 yards. Jamal Agnew had a fumble, which really cost the Falcons in this game. For New York Jets, like I said, Breece Hall, decent game, 19 carries for 68 yards, so a little over 3 yards a carry, but he did have a touchdown. And he did have 2 catches for 8 yards. So nothing compared to Robinson, but decent. Now, Taylor had 172 yards passing, and he also rushed for 44 yards and a touchdown. So 1 passing touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown. He did a better job of playing Justin Fields than Justin Fields does. Not that it was great, but he is actually better quarterback. The only big player on their team was Adonai Mitchell, who they picked up recently in a trade before the trade deadline, who had 8 catches for 102 yards and a touchdown. 12 targets he had. No one else had more than 4 catches in the game. So that's about it for that game. And like I said, no stats in this game at all. All right. We will call it a wraps there. We got a couple more to do, a few more. We'll catch that Rams game where we had some NFL records to look at. But covered quite a few games. We have some more to go. We'll finish them all up tomorrow. Appreciate you listening to NFL Top 10s for Monday. And please like and subscribe. You can find this podcast on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL, where you'll see all the charts, all the top 10s that I've talked about. You'll see the scores. Put the stadiums up there with a score showing of whatever game and whatever home team it was, their home stadium. And then, but yeah, you can see all that at Just the Stats NFL on the YouTube site. You can also, of course, listen to it on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, or whatever app you might use. Really do appreciate you liking it and subscribing. And so for Monday, enjoy the Monday night game, especially if it's your team playing or if you need somebody on there to do well fantasy-wise. But enjoy the game. Hopefully it's a good one on Monday night. So for NFL Top 10s for Monday, I'm out. Have a good one.